Hello everyone, welcome to inspectedGoals, the pod that tries to improve our FPL play through a more analytical approach. we're back, we're back, Sam, after the biggest hiatus of the season. Probably too late, to be fair, as it's completely done now. But we thought we'd get one more in just to wrap it up in a nice 24 bow, Jack Bauer style. How's it been, mate? You've been away on your travels, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. I'm good. I'm glad to be back recording. But I was actually looking at overall that this is our 24th episode, so I think we've done pretty well to do that in 38 game weeks. But yeah, I've been away with work, so I was at the women's under 17s Euros for a couple of weeks. With England, we lost in the semi-finals, so got to the last four, so they did well. It's a disappointing ending, but it's just always going to be like that. It's always going to be really deflating at the end unless you win the whole thing. But first time I've personally been to like a major final, so yeah, it was a great experience. And I was just doing my best to keep up with FPL when I had time while I was there. But yeah, didn't miss any deadlines. Managed to make all my transfers. And yeah, now back in England and enjoyed a bit of a break. Actually, had a good bank holiday weekend. Enjoyed the football. I love watching the last game week of the season when all the matches are at the same time. I just love the chaos of it, to be honest. I wish we had more of that. Or even just more 3 p.m. games now because there's so many televised. I think we miss a bit of that chaos. But yeah, I'm all right, and I somehow managed to get a very small but a green arrow in the last game week, despite not owning Kane because of my transfers. Yeah, how are you doing, mate, in general?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it was a bit of a deflating end of the season overall.
Mm.
I think the final game week was good for me, as we'll talk about in a bit. Could have been a lot better as usual, but it was definitely good. But it's just kind of frustrating that the sort of the back end when you feel like you put yourself in a nice position, you've got players who've got multiple games to come, compared to the average player anyway. And then everyone in terms of the engaged managers had pretty similar teams anyway, and a lot of players didn't play, so it kind of just like fizzled out a little bit. But I think the final game week was fun, at least. But I wasn't able to even watch any of it, which was really annoying because I'm with you. Like Boxing Day and the final day are like the best days for me in terms of the calendar of football, and they are for most people, I suppose, just because all the games on at once. And yeah, I was working in a place where I literally was unable to check my phone, very often at least, and I had to do it slyly. Like the signal was terrible. Everything's literally like the worst circumstance you could ask yourself to be in the game, in the state it's in at the moment, considering the leaks that are coming through, man, and then just like trying to filter through which ones are probably reliable, which ones are not. I mean, even people who are kind of reliable leakers, I guess you could say, are now sort of leaking stuff that's they're not even sure themselves, if you know what I mean. So they are normally reliable, but then they're going, oh, I've got a new source who I don't know if is reliable, but then they're putting it out there, so you're thinking, okay, it's probably like good enough to the
There's some
standard where they're happy
confidence.
to do it. Yeah, but then trying to filter through all that when your pages aren't loading and everything, it was chaos, to be honest with you. Yeah,
Did you manage to make the transfers you wanted to though in the end that you think you would have done otherwise?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, the main issue I had was captain. I was never captain in Rashford. Like that was never happening. But that was the one team that I knew the lineup was correct because someone had told me direct that Rashford was playing, and this was quite early on as well. So I switched from Haaland to Rashford. It was always going to be Haaland, and we heard that Haaland was benched, right? And I saw that news. So I thought, okay, that's fine. I was thinking about doing Salah, and then there was all these leaks about the Liverpool team, like Alisson not travelled, Van Dijk not travelled, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do him just because I haven't seen anything else, and that sounds like a weakened team, so maybe he doesn't play. So I just kind of writ him off from my mind at that point. And I was like, okay, the only one I know for sure is Rashford. I can see he's playing up front. I don't like captaining players like that because they don't have the penalties and set pieces like I always talk about, and obviously he'd only just come back from injury as well, so I wasn't 100% sure it was a good pick, but I just didn't know who else was in my team. I did bring in Kane, and it was basically between him and Rashford, but because I had no leaks whatsoever on Kane, I was like, I'm just going to go for Rashford. I'm sure Kane does play, but in the end, it's too close. I think someone said review had Rashford top right near towards the end, so I just thought.
Yeah.
So I actually logged in to try and change it at one point to Kane, and it was just spinning circles. And I thought, do you know what? If he's top on review, I'm probably going to end up regretting taking it off Rashford anyway. So I just left it on him. That obviously didn't work out. I took a hit as well, but that was because Matoma was rumoured to be benched, and I could have not taken the hit and just played Isak, but I didn't know whether he was starting either. And then because of all the other sort of murmurs, my bench wasn't strong enough, I thought, where if one or two others don't play, because Estupinan didn't start, for example, he was in my lineup. I had Shah, wasn't a particularly good fixture, and I can't remember who my other player was. But
Sure, probably.
oh yeah, Luke Shaw, who was out. So I was thinking, I'm at the borderline now where if I don't bring in someone else, there's a chance I might have 10 or 11 players. So I thought it's worth it. It's the final day. I'll bring in a hit. And the only player I could afford was Eze because I was taking out Matoma, like literally within the range. I didn't really want him. I wanted Saka, is what I wanted. When I looked in, because of the Kane transfer from Haaland, there was obviously just not enough money to do that. So I thought, right, okay, I'm not going to mess around trying to find some sort of differential. Someone like Xhaka, for example, would have been world class, wouldn't it? Getting a brace for Arsenal, and probably should have considered that, I suppose, because it was a very good game to target, that Arsenal fixture.
You couldn't afford Odegaard. I know Odegaard just blanked anyway, but
I
couldn't afford him anyway.
Couldn't afford him anyway, so I just went with Eze because I thought I was trying to be too clever. Obviously, that didn't work out either. But my main man at the back that you pointed out, the Arsenal centre back, who I can't pronounce his name, that you've just been practicing,
Kiwi or
okay, managed to score a goal. So I got some absolute jam on the final day, to be honest, because I never expected him to score a goal. I was hoping he was going to get a clean sheet. Him and Everton were right near the top, but never guaranteed, of course. And then he chips in with a goal, which really helped. So I was literally like a Kane captain away from potentially getting. I haven't looked, but I don't think I'd be top 10k, but I'd be a lot closer. Finished on 28k. Pretty happy with the season overall. It's just. I think we're going to go through it a bit when we talk, and we've had kind of different starts, but we've kind of ended up around the same area. But it's just a little bit more deflating, I think, when you start so well, and then you have just a really bad patch, and then you're always fighting to go back to that point. And in the end, I got very close to my best rank throughout the season was 10k, and I finished at 28k, so I kind of got almost there. But happy overall. It was a decent season. First season, I would say, using review properly every single week. Like I definitely went against it, as we're going to see a lot, probably more than I should have. But it was the first time, sort of, I would say, like baby steps into the world of playing in a more analytical way. And I'm going to talk about how it helped me as well as we move forward. You kind of picked it up last season, didn't you? Although you had that fantastic season anyway, you kind of picked it up halfway through. So let's talk through that.
I started using review like halfway through the season, but it's big. The reason I started using it because I was doing so well. I was thinking, I need to make sure I make the most of this now, and don't do anything really stupid. And because we had those crazy double game weeks, like back to back, I was just really unsure on what I needed to do because a lot of people were taking massive hits. I didn't know whether that made sense for my team. So it was actually Simon, analytical FPL on Twitter, who I messaged a lot. And he gave me advice, and initially he said, "Oh, you should use review." I was using the free model. Eventually, I got paid for the massive data model, and then properly worked out how to use it, and then found it really, really helpful to navigate those doubles. So this is also my first season properly using it. And I guess it was a decent season. I finished 51 or 52k in the end. And which is it's fine. I think I was only maybe 15 points behind you or something. And in my head, your rank sounds a lot better. I guess because it's top 50k, but not much of a difference there. And I got that green arrow or small green on the last day, even though I didn't have Kane because I bought Jesus and Saka. So that was a real gamble because I had no guarantee that either of them started. There was no leak at all.
Yeah,
but I just really liked them as options. It was that or Kane and Eze, and actually it worked out exactly the same points. Because I think I would have captained Salah even if I bought Kane. And captain Salah, I guess at least he got an assist in the end. But he had chances, and it was I think it was definitely close between him and Kane. I think the thing in hindsight, again, it's always so easy to say in hindsight, but I wonder if the Kane and Eze route to captain Kane would have been better, because I wonder if I didn't account enough for the weakened Liverpool lineup overall and just the context of Leeds having to score a goal, possibly. That's something I didn't really think through, that obviously on review isn't going to be picked up as much depending how much you use the market odds, for example. But overall it was annoying to just miss out on top 50k by 1 or 2 points, but overall I think it was decent. And a fine last game week. And the Edison conceding late was a really fitting way to end the season, I felt.
Standard. That's one player I can congratulate myself on avoiding.
He was on 3 bonus as well.
Was he? I didn't know that.
He's on 10 points. 3 bonus God. and a save point. Yeah.
I didn't save myself from it fully because I had him the other time just before, and I don't know how I ended up getting rid of him in the end. I can't remember maybe how it happened, but he didn't troll me because I played Raya and he actually got me some points as well. That was another area that I just totally didn't expect a clean sheet for Brentford at home. I thought maybe he'll get saves, but to get that, there was lots of stuff on the final day. I mean, we talked about through it. We didn't actually watch the matches live. I've watched some of the highlights back and stuff. Looked at some of the stats. I think Rashford had like 0.8 xg or something like pretty high. So to him not to get something, and I saw the highlights where he got put through on goal pretty much and fluffed it up. So loads of ifs, buts and maybes, but the thing is, it's so easy to see them in 1 week, isn't it? And across the whole season, how many of these things happen.
Exactly.
So for anyone to even question that variance is in this game, in all areas as well, I don't just mean overall in the game, like literally players missing just point blank chances and stuff like that can happen in any game or whatever, is crazy. And all of that adds up, across the season to just make that particular outcome. It's like, I think even in hindsight, right, if we were to go back now for each of our teams, right, we made everything the exact same decisions that we've made to this point, all the same transfers, all the same, everything exactly the same, but we just put our captain on the best player every week. I don't know if we'd have won FPL, but it would be extremely close, wouldn't it? So just that, like maybe those 38 decisions, and maybe already about, I don't know, 25 of them we got right anyway because we captained our highest player. So it could just be like 9-10 decisions slightly different. You could be within a shout, or at least a lot higher. Yeah. Just on that alone, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah, definitely. And then you also just get random individual ones, like, again, sorry to bring it up, but you were very close to getting Wilson, weren't you, as him or Shah last
Absolutely,
game.
Yeah.
37. Ultimately, if you bought him and then captained him, that's probably like a 40-point swing or something. I don't know exactly what it is, but that's huge. So you also get random one-off huge swings in individual game weeks as well as all those little things that add up over time. And that's a good example of it. Like, I think if people captain Wilson, like, absolutely fine. Like, if they thought he was going to start both games, they read the X-Men's like really well. He was on penalties, like really good decision. Like, I don't think those people got lucky that Wilson scored more points. But obviously, for the difference in points to be that huge, there is luck. But that doesn't mean people also didn't make a good decision in going for him and Isaac. So
yeah,
even good decisions, there can be loads of variance in. Like, even captaining Kane this week, again, a really good decision to captain him. Like, may well have been the best captain that others didn't pick up on, but for him to get his biggest haul of the whole season in that game week is also like lucky as well. It can be both those things. That's what I think.
Absolutely, I completely agree. The decision. This is the really hard part when you look back, isn't it? It's trying to again separate the decision process from the outcome. It's extremely hard to work that out. The Wilson thing, when we now look at his minutes, we're like, okay, in hindsight, absolutely. And everyone would have had him, I suspect, if they knew he would play those minutes. Now you need to know, was that good play to guess those minutes and get that right? Or did you get lucky because those things were on tenterhooks and in another season, in another world, he doesn't play those games? I mean, he didn't start the final game of the season, did he? So we were kind of right, in terms of Wilson may not be able to play every game, but it just didn't happen in that particular week. So it's very hard to like work out whether you made a good decision there or not. And that's why I see ultimately some people don't care about any of that. They just go, well, he scored really well in 37, so I did make the right decision. I don't think that's the right process to have, but I can understand why people like don't beat themselves and just go, yeah, that's exactly what it was.
I nearly in 37, I nearly had like an absolute horror show because I the quadruple Newcastle defence, 3 defenders and captain Trippier, and after the first game week, I obviously had nothing from them, and also didn't have a Stupinan, so I was on them huge. I think I was down to 70k from 40k. And then, thankfully, Trippier then got those 2 assists, both in the first half. So it was a really swingy game week. And then suddenly at half-time, I was thinking, wow, if they get the clean sheet here, it's going to turn into like a big green arrow all of a sudden. And then it turned out being a small red. But that's why double game weeks are so fun. It can just switch so quickly. And in that game week, it switched not even in the second game, but in the last 10 minutes of the second game. And he nearly scored again, Wilson, as well. He was like through on goal like a minute after he scored as well, right at the end of stoppage time.
Yeah.
But that's like a good example of a swinging game week. And I think in general, I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like in general this season, I've either been doing really badly or really well. I think mine's fluctuated a lot more, whereas you started really well and have been really solid the whole time. And had, obviously, like everyone, had bad and good periods, but have generally been around the same area, whereas mine's been maybe a bit more extreme in both directions in terms of luck and also how well or how badly I've played, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I've done too much different throughout the season. I would say that when the bad results start coming, I seem to be I think it maybe is more just happenstance because of the double game weeks and stuff. I'm more liable to take hits and correct stuff when my team's doing bad, but that makes sense anyway, right? Because usually if your team's doing bad, it's because you've ended up with bad players or you've ended up with injuries or something's happened where then you need to fix a problem, and therefore like using single transfers is quite often too slow. So again, that's hard to work out. There's loads of things we could point back at. So many different things. I could go on forever talking about this sort of stuff. Like, the decision for people to get Alvarez in, like, I think it was quite early on, maybe. I can't remember what game week it was, but 15 Alvarez.
Yeah, as in there was the week where it was 2 weeks before the Christmas wildcard where you had to wildcard.
Oh, okay.
Haaland was benched.
Right, okay, that time. Yeah, I was talking about the more recent one where...
Oh, sorry, yeah, just
obviously the league's completely done, or it wasn't actually when people were getting him, and they were estimating his expected minutes, and I think he's pretty much... I think he got benched maybe once and played nearly every game. And I'm the guy who spends all the time on Man City. I didn't see that coming. I thought De Bruyne and Haaland would play, and then therefore there's not much room for him. It just ended up that De Bruyne ended up getting injured, and so was that a good decision to get him or not? I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's really hard to work out. Maybe he was always due to play anyway. We don't know.
Again, that's where it's hard to know, particularly with that example, because someone's opinion might be, those people got lucky because 3 starts were unlikely. And the people who bought him will think, well, actually, I thought he would start 3 times, and actually I feel unlucky because he only returned in one of those 3 matches.
Yeah.
So, people went big on like triple Man City attack, for example. Again, they'd feel annoyed that, like, if you got Foden, for example, and really called it, they would play a lot in these last few game weeks. You'd be really annoyed because you feel like you deserve something out of that.
He played so well as well in the game.
He got maybe got 1 or 2 returns. I can't remember.
Yeah, he did.
You'd feel like, you could easily have had a hole there.
Yeah, Bruno was the poster boy. Jack's in the chat saying about missing a deadline, and Bruno cost him. Yeah, I think Bruno was a big part of the back end of a lot of players' seasons. I had him and then took him out when I thought he was injured, and then got him back again for a hit. And it's only the very final day he actually returned any points. But I think he was top for XGI for like 5-6 weeks in a row or something, or at least near the top for quite a while.
He actually had, even though De Bruyne got way more assists than anyone this season, Bruno created the highest XG, so had the highest XA all season of all players. And I think that was just total, so I don't think that's per 90. So that might be partly why. I've not looked at it per 90, but he had a really good season.
Makes sense, definitely. But obviously Man United haven't had a striker all year, have they? So that's part.
And De Bruyne is at Haaland, who's a freak finisher.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I saw you did as well, like a little team of the season, and it's so hard to know whether to include those players at City who didn't play for that long, but when they did, were really good, like Diaz, for example, or even De Bruyne. He's played less minutes than a lot of other midfielders, but you kind of have to include him because he's so good.
Well, De Bruyne,
ridiculously good, just ridiculous.
Again, it depends.
These last few months,
it depends what your basing is on. It's like if it's like who's the best player, then obviously De Bruyne's getting in there full stop. Like if it's then total assists, then he gets in there. But for me, for his standards, De Bruyne, he wasn't actually that good this season, which is weird to say because he obviously got loads of assists and he started to play. There was patches without a doubt where he was very good, but there was periods where he was
really good
poor.
in the Champions League, particularly as well.
Yeah.
Both those semi-finals.
I always err on the side of give the person who rarely gets any limelight in those situations. It's like if there's 2 players where I'm not sure, I'll think, well, I'll give this one a go because they'll never see the day of light again, basically. And De Bruyne's always going to be in the conversation every single season. But yeah, I suppose that's not the best criteria to pick it on. Yeah. Yeah, let's have a little look through our teams then quickly. I don't want to. It's not going to be just about me and Sam's teams for here. We are going to do a little bit of that, but and answer some questions as well. It's just a very chilled out stream, hopefully. But I've brought up my team from FPL Review on the screen here now. Sam, do you want to talk us through what these things mean? Because I think for anyone who doesn't know, and it can be quite confusing. I've seen a lot on Twitter actually that people, as they start churning out this stuff, the analytical guys, you get lots of questions in the comments about what it means. So FPL and rank, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? We'll move on from there.
Yeah, so this is basically a page you can find if you go to FPL Review's website and go to, I think it's like season review or something like that. You input your team ID and you get this table with all these different numbers for your team for the season. The top one is just your FPL rank. That's all that is. So really simple. Then there's your XG data. Now that's all post-event. So that's basically where your rank would be if you basically exclude finishing. So for example, if you picked a defender and they conceded 1 goal in that game, but from only one shot they conceded that was on target, or one shot they conceded and it was from distance. Your XG data, that will improve your rank there, because it's either a sign of bad goalkeeping, good finishing, or luck. So it excludes finishing, which can be really kind of noisy and random as well. So it gives you a really good idea actually of decision making, particularly defensively, and in terms of whether you picked attackers who got chances ultimately. So, for example, someone who has a really high XG rank and a really low FPL rank might have had Edison in goal for longer periods,
Yeah.
or might have owned Darwin Núñez for a good amount of time.
It's almost hindsight optimal, isn't it? In terms of like you pick the players that on expected data at least should have done the best, and it's often not known beforehand because you have to have the match happen after you've made the pick. So in hindsight, whoever has XG1, if XG was a perfect indicator of what you would do, then you would be the best manager and you would have come number one as well. Like that's the way I'd view it anyway. That's right.
Yeah, probably. And what as in if you had the number one XG rank, you're not necessarily have the number one FPL rank.
No, you wouldn't, because it doesn't mirror it in real life. But if XG was perfect, and if you have one XG, you score one goal, then obviously it should technically marry up, I guess, because you'd have had the best data and stats throughout the whole season. Honestly.
That's basically a really good measure, like post-event of how well you called it. So if you use a lot of XG data to make decisions, the chances are you'll have quite a good rank there.
Yeah.
Then there's free model and massive data. They're basically two different models that FPL has. The massive data one is in greater detail and is high quality. And that's where you'd be based on that. Now, that's all pre-event. So basically, how high was your expected value across all the game weeks? How many points did you expect to get? And where would that rank you amongst other people? Now, that's not as simple as saying, if you just followed review every season, you're always going to have a good massive data rank. It's not necessarily that simple, because it also depends when you wildcarded. It depends whether you free hit it in a good week, for example. It depends if you're overall doing well and therefore have more team value and are able to get more EV that way long term. But
when
generally,
you made your transfers in the week as well, right? Because the data changes during the week. Yeah.
But generally, if you use that model, massive data model, generally that rank is going to be higher. But there are lots of other things too that accounts for as well. And then variance, this is something I actually learned just this week. That percentage of variance is basically how lucky you were in comparison to other managers. So Luke's here says 49.9%. So he was basically bang in the middle in terms of how lucky managers got. And that is a mixture of your points in comparison to the massive data model, and also takes into account XG data. So we'll take into account things like strikers getting chances but missing them, or teams conceding from very few shots. Now, again, the word luck there isn't a perfect definition, because it's not luck if you choose a goalkeeper who's not very good at stopping shots, for example. Overall, it is really, really noisy, and it's the same with finishing, but there are outliers there. There are really good finishers and keepers who are bad at saving shots in general, but that's very hard to predict. That's what that means. And I mean, maybe if you chat it through, mate, now, because that's your team and kind of where you are on there.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think I talked about it right at the start. I definitely used review throughout the whole season, and I would solve, I think, every week, sometimes multiple times. So I'm not surprised that it's pretty good. Like, I think that's pretty good. 2,500 for XG, roughly 900 in both of free model and massive data. Obviously, the variance one is not one you can really do much about. That's just part and parcel of the game. I'd like to have had better variance, but it wasn't terrible. So that's okay. For me, I think if I want that to be better, and we must stress again, even if you had number one in free model or massive data and XG, it doesn't mean your live rank. I mean, you could have potentially even had a worse rank than me. It doesn't perfectly correlate, but in general, it does seem to correlate very, very well, and that's why we do this. And I think in the last season in particular, it was incredible how close it was. For anyone who's watching this who follows analytical accounts, they'll see that a lot of the top analytical guys, when they've posted their stuff, they're all in sort of the top 100 of this sort of data, and sometimes even like the top 10. And then you look at their rank as well, and it's very, very often top 3k, top 10k. So that's what I've got to strive to get to. I think is to try and I don't want to ignore my instinct for stuff, but just try and curb it a little bit, because I think as well I just took too many hits overall again. Like, I took loads last season. I took 13 hits throughout the season, which is
that's quite a lot.
it's quite a lot, but I took 2 -12s in that in 2 individual weeks. So what's 13? Is that 50, 52? Is my maths bad?
Yeah.
56? Yeah. So then that's a lot of points, right? I mean, that makes a big difference. And often when I've done them and I look through my game week history, whenever those weeks I were that took hits, I usually got a red arrow. I think one I got green, the rest were all red. That's kind of expected when you take hits, I guess, but it is a sign where a lot of the time I bet if I looked at my team, if I didn't take the hits and just left my team or my bench player came in, I probably would just do a lot better overall. So again, I just need to try and focus like on that area of it, and I think that will, as a result, improve in all these areas here. Not necessarily XG data, but in terms of the massive data, definitely. I'm just going to flick very briefly to a screen as well from review where I asked him about hits. I'll come back to this in a minute. So yeah, this is what review told me. So I asked him to do some estimation on the average amount of point hits taken. So the top bit here where it says top 1K, that's in the actual game. So the top 1K in FPL took on average 28.5 hits across the season, which is the
points worth.
Points worth of hits, which is pretty low. And as you can see, top 10K 31.3, so slightly more. Top 500K 37.4. So as you'd expect, as you start to go lower ranks, they've taken more hits. Now you can see also from his chat at the bottom there are certain situations where obviously if you are doing very well and your team is doing very good and you're getting lucky and you're not getting injuries, then you probably don't find yourself in situations where you need to take hits. So it's not just directly that the hit is bad. You've also got the luck where you don't even need to take the hit in the first place. So you have to factor that in. But the standard procedure you can see there is that less hits is generally correlates with a better rank. And then we go to the match day ranks as well, which is massive data ranks from I always say match day, I don't know why. Massive data. Top 100, 13.7 was the average there for the analytical players. So that is what less than half of what the top 1K did in hits. So even more so. And a lot of those guys will be in the top 1K or in or around it because of that high massive data rank. Yeah. And even the top 1,000, 23.3, even less than the top 1K. So going back to my playstyle and what I've done, I really need to work on having a better squad overall, I think, and just taking less hits, and hopefully that will bring all those things in line and it will make me a better manager. So that's what I'm going to try and do even more. I managed to cut it in half this season. Maybe if I can cut it in half again, then I'll be really happy.
In half? Wow, that was a lot the season before.
Yeah, it was like 100 points in hits. Literally, and that was 50 something.
Something I've realised this season as well is not just because analytical players and if you use review, you'll realise it just loves a good deep squad and having good bench players. And I get that for when your players get injured, you've always got someone to come in. But I've only kind of realised this season the value in that in terms of avoiding. There's a lot of value in it if a player doesn't play, but there's way more value in giving you more flexibility with transfers. So if you do get an injury the following week, you're way less likely to use a transfer. You can play one of your strong bench players, and then suddenly you've got 2 transfers to use in one go, rather than using one at a time. So it's that it delays you having to make transfers and delays you having to make decisions in general as well. And I think I only kind of got to grips with that this season, why that's important.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have even if you just have one playing the first sub, it just takes one player to have an awful fixture, and suddenly you're playing the suboptimal team the next week with an injury,
and then
or you're making a transfer
or do whatever. Yeah.
So it's that flexibility it gives you, and you lose out a little bit in your first 11, but it's outweighed by that flexibility and how that works out long term. So yeah, I definitely learned that more this year.
Yeah, like anything, there is a balance to be had, but I think that's just really important for me in particular, and maybe other people, to bear in mind for the start of next season, is because especially at the very start when you have such limited budget and we don't have any information on players, the desire comes to have the strongest 11 you can possibly have, and you start putting all these 4 million and 4.5 million players on your bench just to try and fit in as many premiums as you can and stuff. And I think as you get closer to the start of the game, it starts to happen. And with that smaller budget, it is hard, but I think I'm going to try to at least have some viable bench options. It all depends on price at the end of the day. If they misprice some players and you've got Ben White's at 4.5 million and stuff, then you can kind of make it work anyway. But it's just something I want to bear in mind.
Something is worth saying here is in top 1K, top 10K, and top 500K in terms of average hits taken. That's really easy to explain in terms of if you're in the top 1K, the likelihood is you had a better start. So your team's in a better position, so you just need to make less transfers. So it's kind of really easy to explain that way, but the difference between the top 1K and the massive data 1K, that difference, again, is more interesting because it just shows a difference in style of play.
Absolutely, and I
as
suppose you
well.
could even point out actually here as well, because I think a lot of analytical managers will say the same, that they do play in this safe way, and just being in the massive data top 100 doesn't guarantee you to be in a top 1K. Definitely not. That can never happen for sure. But there's a big difference there, isn't there? So maybe some of these managers, you can even point it the other way and say, maybe if they were more open to the like 1 or 2 more hits, they may have had an impact on their 1K. I mean, you have to get the player right. You know, out of 100 people who take those extra hits, probably 3 of them they win out of that, and 97 don't. But do you want to be one of those 3 people? And we're back down to, do you want to increase your variance towards the back end of the season and stuff, and take those gung ho approaches? I mean, I think the winner overall this season made some. I mean, it's always going to happen when you look back at their seasons and look at the luck. They had some crazy luck, but sometimes just having those gung ho plays seems to. He is that anomaly of that data, right? But how do you just guarantee that you're that one? You just can't. You can't guarantee you'll be the one. You're more likely to be one of the ones who suffers. But it's certainly something to consider, I think, if you're. And I suppose they probably did. A lot of the guys who were in and around it, who had a certain goal at the end, probably did something a little bit suboptimal in the last couple of weeks in the hope that it worked. So fair play.
Yeah.
Right, should we go to your team,
John? So this is basically the same, exactly the same table, but for my team rather than Luke's. And so my massive data number is 310, so pretty low, and same XG data is 394, and I think a lot of that was, again, Nunes. I had him for so long compared to other people. But my overall rank's 51k. Now, I think from the top of my head that my massive data number and XG number is really, really similar to last season. And last season I finished 1.8k.
Right.
And so there's a big difference there in terms of variance. So my variance is minus 41 points, and was luckier than 28% of managers, so a bit lower. So yeah, there's definitely lots of luck there. One thing that's interesting as well, if you put your team through this, is you see another image that you can see on the screen now if you're watching on YouTube that shows X-min security. So that kind of shows how many players you bought that played mins, and that's more of so mine's a lot higher than Luke's there as well, which just shows a difference in style of play. I think you take a lot more risks in terms of a player with lower X-mins but has a higher upside if he does start.
Yeah.
And whereas I'm a lot more safer and just like players I know that are going to play. So again, that's not that one's better. It's, in fact, it's not as big a difference as I thought it would be, but a little difference. But that's
I generally played safer though this season. I think I generally did play a lot safer. Yeah, there's a few I can point to though. It's like you always remember the ones that go like. Well, I didn't even end up getting him in the end, but a lot of people got Iwobi right, and I was saying Sarabia is the one to go for. His XG was much better. He ended up outperforming Iwobi in that double game week. But I didn't even end up doing that one. So it's stuff like that where I'd be happy to more take the chance, right? And that's why I was so annoyed at myself for the Callum Wilson thing. Right? That was the one that really hurt me. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah. So I actually think overall I played pretty similarly in terms of how well I played.
You played better. You can say it. It's okay.
No, so I actually think my massive data rank was actually slightly better last season, but it was like 200 and something, like late 200s off the top of my head.
Oh, okay. I was pointing to me. You played better than me.
Oh, sorry. Possibly, yeah. The number, but yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But we only finished within like 10 or 15 points of each other anyway. And it's just that variance, like, it can be huge. Like for most people, generally, you'll finish like generally about where you probably should finish for most people. But that's really like a massive generalization, and you will have people when there's 10 million people playing a game. There will be people on the far extreme end of both of those things who will finish like top 1k and have been extremely lucky. And you'll see variance scores of like 150 plus, and you'll see some that are like negative over 100 or 150. So you will have those people on the far end as well. But yeah, like overall, I'm like fairly happy with my season, to be honest.
Yeah, and if anyone knows how to manage that, if anyone knows how to manage the luck part of it, then please let me know.
How to get better variance.
Yeah, I saw in his list here you've put top 10k about.
Oh yes, I saw a tweet from so FBL Review tweeted to say that there were only 15 managers in the top 10,000 managers. So what's that, like less than 0.01% or something? Who had a negative variance score. So of those top 10k managers, 895, whatever it is, have positive variance. So those 15 managers have done unbelievably well and made really good decisions to get in there, despite actually being a bit unlucky. So it shows just how much luck you do need, like luck, to get into the top 10k. But again, most of those top 10k players will have played really well also. so it's not taking anything away from them.
Yeah, some will have played
Like,
very badly though as well, and just got
some will
extremely
have done,
lucky.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and there'll be some people who played really well that are like 250k. I did
absolutely.
a tweet about that like a couple of days ago, just saying that the game's just so wild, so don't get caught up on a number. But when we attach, when there's ultimately one number measures how good you are overall rank. Well, for most people, like it is easy for people to get attached to that, and you've just got to remember, like it's an absolutely nuts game. Like you can play well and do really awfully, you can play badly and do really well in any game week, but also over the course of a whole season, um, as well. And I think I've also um, I've definitely appreciated this season the importance in team value. Like generally, I don't take too much, don't read too much into team value in terms of it doesn't outweigh the value of uh, of making a transfer later in the week. Like the difference of like 0.1 in team value is not big enough to outweigh having more knowledge to make decisions. But in terms of like selling players and losing a lot of team value, that had a big knock-on effect for my team. So, for example, game week 15, when we knew Haaland was benched, in my head I was like, oh, it's only 2 more game weeks. I know Alvarez is starting, so I sold Haaland for Alvarez, captained Alvarez. He actually scored, so did well for 1 game week. But then that didn't work out well in 16, and then suddenly I went into that break and had like 1 million less value to spend on my team.
Yeah.
So then I didn't put nearly enough value in team value. So that's definitely something I've learned. Is that was definitely a bad decision to sell Haaland at that time, even though I knew I could buy him straight back. The knock-on effect was huge for me because that resulted in me not having other players and just having a worse team from game week 17 onwards.
Yeah.
So that's something I've definitely learned. And then another thing that I think, not that necessarily that I've learned, but that's just been like emphasized more for me is just the importance of predicting minutes and how that's such a huge part of the game, as well in terms of being good at it. It's a huge skill element, I think, in terms of predicting that. And there's a lot of luck involved in it, but I think if you have a good read on it, you're going to be better than other players. And that's one of the reasons I really don't want. A lot of people want a deadline at kickoff of the first game. That's one of the reasons I don't want that, is because it's just another thing that makes the game easier for everyone, basically.
Yeah, I'm not even going to get into that because it's just unsolvable, isn't it, as to what they do if you don't want that.
Yeah. But yeah, ultimately, if you have it at the first kickoff, I just think you could have Man City playing at 12:30 3 game weeks in a row, and people just end up rotating their Man City midfielder, and it just really makes the game more restricted. But
I think on that note, the one that you picked up on there saying that you thought it was a mistake to sell Haaland to Alvarez, like I think I do agree with it, just because in that scenario, there's pretty much no scenario you can think of where you probably don't buy Haaland back at some point from that because of how good he was. And because,
I was 100% getting him in 17 for that free wild card. Yeah.
And because the difference in price, like sometimes when it's like borderline, for example, like you think the player could drop to a point where it's barely going to affect you, you can sort of get away with it. But when that's probably not going to happen, you are literally just throwing money away, aren't you, on essentially 1 week. And it could be a really good week, like it was a good week, but yeah, I think I agree with you there, and I have to bear that in mind for next season. We're in a similar situation where it's like, do I really want to do it for just 1 or 2 weeks, and then probably have to buy the guy back for an extra $1 million in like 3 weeks?
It's a long-term impact.
Probably not, yeah. Cause
it was actually that game week. It was the game week where Alvarez scored really early, and then Cancelo got sent off and just killed the game.
Oh yeah, I do remember.
And then Haaland actually came off the bench and he scored like a penalty in the last minute stoppage time.
I will say as well, though, I had a really high, seemed to compared to most, like a pretty decent team value. I don't think I actually,
really high actually. Yeah, it was really high. I'd look at your team.
I don't really remember doing anything in particular to make that happen. I didn't even make that early transfers that often. So I don't really know.
Good start to the season. Good start to the
season. I didn't sell Haaland. I had Trippier early. There was lots of different things like that, I suppose, that contributed. But it didn't really help me, despite me saying that I think it's really important to have a good squad. And you would have thought therefore having a high team value would help in that area. It didn't really help me towards the back end, like for whatever reason. I just I had stuff like had Isak over Solanke, and then like because I could afford it, but then that didn't really benefit me because Solanke outscored Isak anyway, and maybe that's just bad luck at the end of the day. But yeah, when you were talking about the minutes there, I think again just getting players who are on the pitch is just. It is so important. I know you can look at an individual game week and you can go, okay, this player came off the bench and he hauled and he can do it in 10 minutes and all this palaver. That's great. But overall, when you look at the broad sort of picture, and we've got players like McAllister in our team, and it showed it towards the back end. All the Brighton players that just weren't playing in the doubles, they suddenly become much, much poorer options as a result. and just not having players on the pitch, Rashford not starting, all that stuff had a big effect on our teams towards the end. I think it ended up scraping the barrel in some areas, or having to make hits as a result of players just not appearing. And how much you could judge that, I'm not sure, but it's it's just food for thought. That again, next time when the opportunity presents itself for a player like Mahrez, yes, you can take that chance, but it's not just the he has to get the points on the pitch first of all, and he has to he has to turn up, and then you potentially have to use a transfer as well down the line to then get rid of him. It's like it's too much of an impact on your team when probably just avoiding it overall is a good decision. I mean, for a guy who spends all his time looking at Man City, I barely owned any Man City players this season. I literally had Haaland, I had Edison at the point where it made sense from the beginning of the season, I think it was game week 1, and then one other time. And I think I bought Ake and Grealish, with 2 other players that came into my team at various points where it kind of made sense to me. But there was a reason why I avoided them. I do the predictions. It's funny. Everyone always says, "Oh, you said he was going to start." Yeah, I think he was going to start, but it's only a prediction. I'm not confident enough to bring him into my team. It's literally we're talking prediction because people have asked me. Yeah, and I suppose the same thing's going to happen again probably. But anyway,
I had Ward and Iverson in game week 1.
I was very close to doing that. Very close to doing that. But
I sold one of them, and then Ward literally from the next game week, Ward that went on that crazy run. Like 5 clean sheets.
This is why Jan, if anyone knows him on Twitter, is just the absolute GOAT of this game. I think he's 7th best overall manager now, and it's just like based on the last few seasons alone where he started picking this up, and it's just he literally was he didn't have Order Everson from the beginning, and they were awful for those first 8 games, like 5 points or something in 8 weeks or something.
Yeah.
And then he gets them on wildcard in 8 ahead of their good run.
When everyone else sold him.
When everyone else is avoiding or selling, and then. Yes, they absolutely got lucky to get like 5 or 6 clean sheets in a row, like without a doubt. But the fixtures were there, and the value made sense. And he just manages to block all that stuff out and just go with what it says. He had triple Brighton midfield, triple Newcastle defence. Like doesn't care about any of that stuff, and that's where I want to get to. He's like the holy grail for me to get to that level.
He's excellent. Yeah, he's really good. Another thing I was just going to mention is hits. So I only took 4 hits all season.
It's really impressive.
So, but there's probably 1 or 2 times I think in hindsight I probably should have taken one when I didn't. But I just have the opposite problem to you where I'm too scared to take them. But I also think it's partly the way I set my team up, because I set my team up with more secure minutes. It's just less often that it's EV positive for me to take one, because I've generally have players who play more minutes as well. But yeah, I took 4. I took 2 fairly early on actually. Maybe there's were there postponed fixtures early? I can't remember. But I took 2 early on, and then I took 2 around double game weeks towards the end as well.
Yeah, we had the Queen's death, didn't we? Fairly early on, didn't we?
That was it. Yeah, did that result in hits? I can't remember.
Well, we missed it.
That was a whole game week cancelled, wasn't it? Yeah. So yeah, I only took 4. The season before, I only took 3, and that was even more. But that was because I had such a ridiculous start. I just kept getting lucky and was in a position where I didn't need to. But I should have taken more towards the end of the season. I was sat really badly for one of the last doubles, so. Yeah, my problem is that I don't take enough, actually. So there's a middle ground for both of us, I think.
Yeah. To be fair, I think nearly all of mine were at least on the borderline where it was like either EV positive, like about the same, or maybe just slightly under. So it's not like I ever took them if it was just crazy. I think the minus 12 I took, where I got in Salah and ditched Kane and all that stuff, generally worked out pretty well. Like... One of mine was Raya to Edison and or Kepa to Raya to Edison, and like for that one game week because Edison had a double, his EV was actually 4 points higher. So I thought, this could actually work out in one game week. So it made so much sense. And then Edison had like an extra fixture even between then and the end of the season. So that was an absolute no-brainer one for me because I knew my team wasn't set up to ever have 3 Man City outfielders. So that was a really easy one. But sadly didn't work out. Yeah, didn't he play one game of the double and concede?
He played one then, and then he dropped for the ones and then conceded late. Yeah, I was probably about, I'd imagine I was about minus 10 or 12 down on that move in the end.
Yeah, Edison probably and Darwin can contribute a lot to that XG data of yours, I would say. Those 2 players definitely unlucky in different ends of the spectrum there, but both incredibly unlucky. Like
the annoying one with Darwin, I didn't have him for 16 when he got a brace. Then I had him from 17 all the way through. And then when everyone wildcarded in 26, I also sold him that week and he's braced again. So I had him in between 2 braces. And I think he scored 2 goals across those like 9 or 10 game weeks.
Yeah, madness. I think we've got a question later about our lowest point, and I'll get to that. Mine is definitely definitely the week I wildcarded. We'll get to that. Like literally 50 points difference between my teams.
That's one of my high points.
For God's sake, that destroyed me, to be honest. I'm just bringing up on the screen a rank compare between me and Sam across the season. Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. Game weeks at the bottom, we've got rank at the side. As you can see, Sam's start was nowhere near as good as mine. Mine was particularly good though. I mean, where your rank is and where you started, I don't think that was bad at all. I think that's like pretty. Is that 250,000 you've got at the top there, or is it 2.5 million? It's 2.5 million, isn't it?
2 million, yeah. 2 million.
So between 1 and 3 million in a game.
It's fine for a start, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's totally fine. It was like a pretty good start. I just had a really exceptional start, and that's why my disappointment's quite high. But you can see that you really caught me up. We both had a terrible period, really, after World Cup, which I think was quite common amongst a lot of analytical players, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then, again, you caught me up in the weeks afterwards, and then we kind of leveled out and ended up just about the same. So, yeah, if you'd have had my start and then your graph from then on, you could have done particularly well.
Game week 1 to 15 looks bad on mine, but actually that's quite normal to be that high. You just started really well, and then by 15 I'd got to 100k, and I was like, this is great. And then it was from 15, and then beyond Christmas that it was really bad, and then I was 600k in game week 25, and that was just 2 weeks before I wildcarded, and then you can see we both wildcarded and did well, but I just did extremely well. I got from 600k to 50k within 7 game weeks.
Crazy.
Yeah, from 26 through till 36 or I can't remember. Yeah.
Is there anything to learn here, right, in terms of the World Cup? Because it split the season. I know we're not going to have the same situation this season, but I suppose we'll probably use a wild card roughly around the same time, well, maybe a little bit later, but we'll use a wild card essentially, which is what the World Cup was. It was a wild card, wasn't it, for all intensive purposes? Change our entire team. Like, I just, for whatever reason, apparently didn't adapt to the new status quo. I don't know if it was bad luck or what. Like, it felt like it was bad luck at the time, but maybe I just made really poor decisions. I'll have to go back and have a look, because for me, I think Man City were all over the place, weren't they, when they came back?
Yeah.
You know, Cancelo, I had Cancelo in my team. He just got dropped and then sold. You know, I kept convincing myself he'd come back. There was various things I can think of that were pretty bad, but you know, Haaland wasn't working out. You know, Man City were just dreadful, I think. So maybe that's why it had that impact.
Yeah.
For me,
it was obviously because I didn't have Trippier, but there were other things as well, I think. Did you have Foden on the restart?
I got Foden. Like, he went on his really good run, and I got Foden, and then he didn't play either. I don't know if that was after the restart or not. I mean, I'd have to go back and check. But
can't remember now off the top of my head, but
it's probably worth going back and looking at
also Edison and Kepa around then as well.
Edison and Kepa, 100%.
Again, that didn't work out for weeks. Darwin was about that time as well. There are a few different things, I think. I don't think were there any big captaincy swings? I can't remember.
I don't know. I know there was one mistake I made for sure. That was Chalobah. I got him in my wild card. He played 12 games in a row for Chelsea, and I got him in, and then he just didn't play again pretty much all season, like towards the back end. Reece James. I
made a mistake with Cucurella as well.
Yeah.
I went Cucurella and was really confident in it, and then I think the game week after, lots of people went for Shaw and he scored.
Yeah, that was another one of my low points. I went Digne over Shaw, and he scored his goal versus Bournemouth, and he got 15 points or something stupid.
So annoying, yeah. Yeah, Cucurella was a mistake from me as well, I think.
Horrendous. Yeah. Right, let's move on to next slide here, which you got, Sam, off of XG Philosophy. It's expected points. Apologies if you're on like a handheld device or whatever. You probably can't see this too well. I'm squinting myself, but because it's a vertical versus horizontal on our slides, it's the best I could do. But I mean, it's really quite interesting. I only saw it just before the pod after you sent me, but we've got expected data on the left-hand side in terms of expected points, based on obviously the XG Philosophy of each game, which they tweet out often. And then the actual result of where they finished. I just think, once again, it just shows you how good expected data is overall as a general predictor. Everyone is pretty damn close to where you'd expect it. There are a few outliers that are probably relatively significantly different, but even those aren't huge. I mean, Fulham and West Ham we looked at, didn't we, which are particularly different, but it's just I suppose it's a nod to the fact that, again, it looks like we're doing kind of the right thing by following the expected data, the expected points. And there's always, it's almost like quantum mechanics, isn't it? Where it's never going to be exact. It's always going to be like an approximate measurement of where they should roughly be within a certain field. And that is pretty much what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I guess for people listening who can't see it, it just compares the actual table to an XG table, and how far teams have moved. And the interesting thing is, for those teams that have got a big difference, is then it's a discussion point about what's the reason for that. Was it bad finishing? Was it luck? Was it bad goalkeeping? Was it good goalkeeping? Because they're the main things, aren't they? Finishing is one of them because it shows you the quality of the chances they had. The second one is goalkeeping. If you had a really good goal stopper, a shot stopper, or a poor one, and then the third one is just luck of teams missing big chances against you, for example. And then some muddiness as well, just because XG is not perfect as well.
Yeah,
so,
and also you're gonna have referee decisions in there for the points. You're gonna have red cards. You're gonna have handballs. You're gonna have VAR situations. Like that's why you're never gonna have it bang on. Even if we had like perfect correlation between the data, there's always going to be other factors as well that can affect the game. But despite all that, it's still incredibly close.
And like game state as well, like a team could have really high XG, but it was in a game where they won 6-0. The game that was already won, and then they created loads of chances. In a way, those chances are meaningless. You're generating XG, but it doesn't actually matter. Whereas like one high XG chance created in a 0-0 match in the last 10 minutes is way more valuable. So yeah, it doesn't account for that too. But so to come out, I guess, to pick out a couple of teams like United, for example, there's a bit of a difference there. They've almost like switched with Brighton. So actually, based on expected data, there's a good chance that Brighton might have been in the top 4 this season. That doesn't really surprise me, having just watched them play all season and watched some of the chances they've missed as well. And it's a thing as well that a lot of people discussed when Potter went to Chelsea. They had a run where, when he initially was there, where they were. In fact, they were also not creating many chances, but the chances they were creating, they just kept missing. And because that used to happen at Brighton, people were saying, "Oh, is it a Graham Potter thing?" But I don't think it is. Like Brighton have continued to do that as well since Potter left. And like, how much can a manager influence finishing, for example? I don't know. So yeah, it just shows how good Brighton are. That they could have been in the top 4 this season, which would have been great fun. Yeah. But it'll be fun to watch them in Europe anyway.
Is there anything to take out of this for next season? I know things will change, right? We'll have different managers in a lot of situations. We'll have different players. We'll have different fixture lists. We'll have all sorts of different things. But I suppose if there is anything to take out of it, it's stuff like Arsenal did actually a lot better than their expected data suggested. Now, you could say, well, because it's recency bias, I guess, Arsenal tailed off towards the back end. They knew the league was done. They had some harder fixtures. Maybe that had impact. But this is across the whole season, right? So overall, Arsenal probably weren't as close to Man City as they should have been, and I suppose Man City as well, as you can see, their expected data wasn't as good as it was in previous years, despite having Haaland, which is something. I suppose it's just stuff to bear in mind, I guess, that Arsenal might not push them as close, and we have to factor in that these players are going to go up in price, right? There is absolutely no chance that, despite FPL being pretty terrible at pricing players, we're not going to have Martinelli, Odegaard and Saka at the ranges that we had them this time. I don't know what they're going to be, 9.5 and stuff like that for some of these players, I guess, maybe around that, 9.5. I don't know, but so you're factoring yes, they are very good players. Yes, they're very young as well, so the potential for growth and getting better is there. But the expected points there for Arsenal as well, I know this is just points, bear in mind, not just on the individuals. They were actually quite far away from Man City, so
yeah. Just because they finished within 5 points of them, I don't think that means that they're suddenly title contenders next season. I just think City are huge favourites again next season.
Absolutely.
And it wouldn't surprise me if Arsenal did again finish within 5 points of them, but I think it's unlikely. I think again, same as before the beginning of this season, I'd expect Man City to win it really comfortably. And they won it, I guess you could say, comfortably in the end, but ultimately by 5 points. I was just looking at Man City's XG for the season. Actually, was 77.7, and they scored 94 goals. It just shows how monstrous. A lot of that will be Haaland's goals from low XG chances.
Yeah.
He's crazy. In fact, it's not even from low XG chances. It's just that he consistently scores from just good chances. It's just that he misses very few. Whereas someone like Son in years gone by was good because he scored from low XG chances. It's hard to know what you take from it. It's just interesting to kind of see where teams might have been and who's maybe been a bit unlucky or lucky. And the one we discussed before we started recording was Man United. Was I suggested, is their actual finish better? Was that because of De Gea being a good shot stopper? But then we looked at the expected goals prevented, and actually he's not been particularly good at shot stopping. He's been about average, maybe slightly worse than average. So actually maybe Man United got quite lucky in terms of goals not going in.
I think any fan will tell you that, that Man United,
people missing chances against them.
They weren't particularly good in some games, and they managed to get lucky with some clean sheets in home games quite a lot of the time. I think they said David De Gea, the saves thing, and there was some games where he made some good saves, but the data doesn't suggest that, right? It just poor finishing against them is a bit of luck.
And again, they scored. So again, United scored 58 goals from 67 xG. So they underperformed it by quite a lot. So actually, they must have got really lucky with missed chances. Yeah, and again, it's partly maybe to do with the timing of goals and things like that. But yeah, I think that's an interesting one. And then Brentford are just like cemented now as a good Premier League team. They're above, top half, but also top half in XG. Be interesting to see if they continue getting better, particularly with half a season without Tony. Yeah, Fulham is the one with the biggest difference. But again, even on expected data, they would have stayed up fairly comfortably. There's a decent gap there between them and the bottom four teams.
A lot of that is
anyway.
Leno, isn't it? A lot of it is. We saw he's like plus 10. Well, it depends what model you look at, but he's something like plus 10 for prevented goals against. So he really stepped up.
And that's where like luck becomes doesn't do it justice as a statement. It's not luck. If Leno's performed really well, he's a member of that team that's put in loads of good performances. That's not lucky. It's having a good player who's performed well that season.
And there's no guarantee they go and do it the next season, is it? That's the thing.
No.
I mean, similar to Ederson, he was the source of all sorts of banter this season, but we've been through it before. His general data in terms of XG prevented and one-on-ones and stuff isn't actually that bad across all the time he's been there. If anything, it's good. It's in the positive. This was a particular outlier. Now, can we point to performance and say, okay, he's just, he's tailed off and this is going to be his new norm? Maybe. But, when you're hitting sort of 20 clean sheets for every season that you've been in Man City and your stats are generally good, I'm about to get that gif out of I'll do it again with that dog next to it or whatever. Like that is potentially a thing that happens if Ederson starts coming in at 5.5. There's people probably laughing at me in the chat right now. Like I'll be there again, exactly that. I will be there in and around the conversation, unless he has just tailed off and he's useless, which we can't ever rule out. But
if Ortega starting next season from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean Ortega, the few games he played, he ended up getting bonus and everything, didn't he? It was just. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. That guy.
How old
is
Ortega? I have no concept of that.
Oh, I don't really know, to be honest. I can check it out whilst you fill the gap with the dance or something.
I won't fill the gap with the dance, but I'll talk more about this table. So Fulham.
He's 30.
He's 30. Yeah, I couldn't remember if he was like an older keeper or like one of the younger ones who just came through. He's one of those. Has he been? I can't remember even where they signed him from or anything, to be honest.
Armenia, I think. Yeah, and Byfield and 1860 Munich. Yeah, he's played.
Okay. Yeah.
He's been around.
Yeah, interesting. And West Ham are the other one who probably, and we knew this. Like when there was talk of West Ham sacking David Moyes, like we knew it was absolute nonsense because you've just looked at that. They've been so unlucky in so many games. They were still creating lots of chances. They were defensively, particularly, they were really good. They just kept conceding from like one mistake or a long range shot. It was so obvious they were absolutely fine. And again, I would say it was exactly the same with Palace. They just had hard fixtures, and they were never going to go down and never in a relegation battle. There were too many teams between them and the drop zone.
Be a tough season next season for West Ham if they lose Rice, though, won't they? I think having a player in that middle area of the pitch that is just so good. I mean, Man City showed it this season with Rodri and stuff, and I just think it's so important to have a player in that position that can just dominate the game. I said Man United highlight that as well with the fact when they signed Casemiro and the difference with having Casemiro in the team or not does make a big difference to them. And he's even sort of in the twilight of his career and he's still managing to perform.
Yeah.
Bruno Gomes.
There's talk of Rice maybe going to Bayern Munich.
Oh really? Okay, I thought there was a chance he goes to Arsenal. So, I think if he does go to Arsenal, it will massively improve them. But yeah, I just think, all areas of the pitch are important. They're obviously very important. But I think having a player who in that middle area of the pitch is just really important at the moment. Brighton, even though McAllister ended up playing 10 towards the end of the season, I think Casado and McAllister in centre midfield makes a big difference to them as well. They're potentially losing them. I mean, they'll probably make it work and find some other talent that they usually do. But just that's something to bear in mind, I guess, because obviously being a ball dominant team isn't the most important thing, but if you are a ball dominant team, then you're generally able to force the play to be your style and generate more chances as a result. Like overall, it's not you can be a counter-attacking team, of course, but I think it's useful to have that. So I have to keep an eye on.
Right, he's so good, Rice, as well. I think a lot of people don't appreciate how good he is.
I never really used to rate him particularly highly. I thought it was the whole English thing, but I think as more and more and more I see of him, I just think he is the real deal. He is a good
great ball carrier, good at winning the ball back, good passer. He's just got a lot to his game, I think. Don't know. Is there anything else you want to discuss based on that? The other thing I had written down to discuss was any like changes to the game, like whether we think there should be any or whether we expect there to be any.
Well, I've kind of got a little. I'll probably get quote tweeted from this and be put out, but I've kind of got a little bit of an in there in terms of I kind of know someone who works closely or works in FPL, and yeah, they don't give much away, believe me. So it's not like I'm sitting there getting leaks at all or anything like that from them. That flat out just doesn't happen. They're very protective, but the overriding sort of suggestion and opinion that I get from them is that I don't think there'll be any changes. I mean, you'll probably see a lot of it. I think there could be some rule tweaks. As to what they are, it would be speculation on my part. I mean, I think the assists one needs looking at. I just don't like the way assists work at the moment. The fact that sometimes you get granted them for just nothing, and sometimes you don't for. I mean, the Isak assist was perfect, wasn't it? Every person who watches football and he sees him beat like 3 or 4 men and cross the ball kind of wants that to probably get some points in some way or scenario. Like, I know it bounced off of the guy, but it was an amazing piece of play that goes unrewarding in the game. So maybe there's something they can do around that. And then you get stuff like Harry Kane in the same week, to highlight it, had that shot like in the penalty area and it was blocked by a defender about 2 yards in front of him, bounced like, I don't know, 20 metres behind him in a complete opposite direction. And then the guy scores from that. And that goes down as an assist. You know, Isak was actually trying to assist. Kane was not trying to assist. And then they give an assist point for the opposite way. That just doesn't. That highlights to me the ridiculousness in the rule, and it comes down to that. But anyway, whether they'll change that or not, I don't know.
They could go with Opta assists, which doesn't include rebounds, I believe.
No,
but also wouldn't include Isaacs.
Yeah, so they could go with Opta and then make but we will include rebounds. But then you need to come up with a set rule that doesn't include intent. I think. Trying to work out the intent of players is just nigh on impossible. I mean, everyone who knows who's played the game, sometimes you aren't particularly us who aren't even that good at football. We're not particularly aiming for a person. We're aiming for an area of the pitch a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like there wasn't much uproar because not many people owned him at the time, but a few did in the analytics crowd. There was a Trent assist.
Yeah,
it was just
slightest nick. Yeah, it's the slightest nick.
He's smashing it across the face of goal, and it takes a little deflection and goes into whoever it was, their path, and they tap it in. It's an assist, and it was given as an assist by Opta.
Saka's one as well. I think he got an assist taken off of him for. And I had him for that as well. I mean,
Isaacs wouldn't be given an assist by Opta, I don't think.
Because it did deflect enough.
It's completely different, but yeah, I get it though. I think that's one area. If they maybe just go with Opta, and it also just removes any kind of annoyance at FPL.
Yeah, they can just literally brush the shoulder off and go, well, Opta have decided this, so that's what it is, and you just have to take it on the chin. It's less overall points, so I'm not sure whether they will do it, but I think it just makes the game better, because I don't like those moments when it doesn't feel fair.
The rules are muddy, but there was a couple that were just was definitely wrong. Edison's was ridiculous. It was a joke.
Oh, that's just a mistake. I mean, they can make mistakes. The way it works again there, I know a little bit about it because I did work at BT Score Zone at one point, and I've even been to where the gold accreditation panel was, and I was working for different things I've done in the past, and you know, at the end of the day, there is a person or maybe 2 or 3 people that will make a decision based on stuff that they see. So they are making that opinion at that time, and then they may change their mind later, as you see from the accreditation, and then it goes through certain reviews. I'm not going to get deep into it, but they have to go off of what that person or that group of people have decided at that time, and they can make a mistake. They are humans at the end of the day.
Yeah. So. But again, if it was just Opta, again, it just removes that. It
does, but then it comes down to when do you take it from Opta? What's the Opta feed? So do you take it like they do at the moment, where you go with Opta and then after an hour, I think it is at the moment, after the final kickoff, is that right, for the day, for the points? Well, okay, that's fine, but then the next day, Opta may have updated their feed and it's changed again. Sure. So then you have the conversation of, okay, when do we finalise that?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like within the same game week should probably be the rule on that, but
it'd be fine by me.
It's an interesting discussion. Like Mark, I didn't own March, but ultimately he scored a goal and it wasn't given.
Yeah, that was particularly annoying. Yeah,
but like I said, it's a mistake and it happens as well. And with their current rules as they are, they kind of did the right thing. They just couldn't change it afterwards.
Yeah, you can't change the rules later because otherwise you just do it all the time. Annoying, but I certainly wish they did because I'd have had more points. But yeah, that's fair enough. The annoyance comes from the fact that it was given a goal, and I don't think there was enough to say, oh, that's not a goal, and then they changed it back to a goal. So, there's other situations where it does feel ownership led sometimes. I don't think it is, but when a player scores and you just blatantly think the goal's going wide or a deflection, and they just don't even bother even looking at it, if it feels like. And then some players, it's like the microscope's on them.
Yeah. Yeah, possibly. There's a couple of other things I wrote down. So, just again, something that people discuss every year is just defensive midfielders. There's not enough route for points. So even though they're cheaper for that reason, you just never end up buying them anyway. So like Declan Rice, there's no point in being in the game. No one's ever going to own him unless maybe he was suddenly on penalties or moved more advanced. Even though he's only 4.5, like it's still wait. Even you'd have to be like 3 before you consider buying him. So they need to either be really flexible with pricing and move those players to even cheaper than 4, for example, so they become proper enablers and there's a reason to own them, or you uh, maybe change the bonus point system so it's easier for them to get points or something. I don't know, but like maybe something there. Transparency about price changes, but everyone knows that would be helpful. It's been discussed a
I
million
really
times.
like that. I mean, people like the whole thing of do you go early, do you not go early? But sometimes these things are just completely out of your control, right? I just
Yeah.
don't. I don't like that either. I think that there should be, yeah, at the deadline, the prices move situation.
Mm.
So throughout that week, you can make the transfer whenever you want to make the transfer during the week, but the prices won't actually change until that point. So we get to wait to the very end just in case, I guess, any news comes out, and then make the transfer rather than feel forced to do it. But I get it's part of the game and it always has been, so I'm not going to argue too much on that one. But
It's just that it's more that transparency thing. Like there are websites that are dedicated to try and
yeah,
track it,
I
and they
know.
can't even get it right. It's hard to work
I
out.
wouldn't be surprised if that is a change eventually. I think you might
Mm.
see that. These things all come with a cost, right? Especially when you've got like 12 million people playing the game and the traffic that comes through the website. Then think about the traffic when people go there for the price changes as well
Yeah, yeah,
continuously.
of course.
It's all
Yeah.
things I suppose they have to factor in.
Mm.
Yeah. If it's up to me, I'd have no chips. I'd maybe even remove captain. I'd be proper boring.
Oh no, I don't like that.
I know you'd say that.
Yeah, yeah, I don't like that at all. Well, I like the chips. I think it just adds another element, like trying to get into a bench boost, etc. But yeah, particularly captaincy. Like they're already like, for example, Haaland this year, people are complaining always pointless because everyone captains him every week. But that's not true because we didn't captain him sometimes. But if
No.
there was no captaincy, he would literally be pointless because everyone would just own
You
him.
can't do anything about that. If there's a player that good in the game, like I know you can price them really highly to put them off to begin with, and that's something they should probably definitely look at. Whether they will or not, I don't know. But what can you do if a player's just so good and everyone wants him in a team? We've been there multiple times in the past.
Sure,
Suarez's
but
and Salah's and everyone, like, people are going to own them regardless.
yeah, but if you don't have captaincy, then they are absolutely pointless. If you have captaincy, they still
Well, you say that, but yeah, people who take into account the maths and obviously doubling their score, definitely. But I still think you'd see massive ownership for someone like Haaland, even if it was like 14 million and there was no captaincy.
no, yeah, yeah. That's my point is that you would. So you would. I still think 100% of people would own him. It's just you wouldn't have the opportunity to differentiate and captain him or not captain him,
Right,
basically.
okay, I see
So
what you're
there's a
saying.
point to him being there because if Salah plays Leeds or whatever and Haaland plays Arsenal,
Mm,
suddenly again he's not pointless in the game. He's valuable to people who still choose to captain him against Arsenal,
gotcha.
for example. So yeah, that's why I like that because again Trent like he's already pretty pointless because he's not a captaincy option because he plays in the same team as Salah in years gone by. This year he was interesting because not as many people owned him. But yeah. Maybe I did. I think I preferred it with just one wild card. Now we have the other one in the second half of the season. Oh no, we always had that. Sorry, one free hit. I quite like that. Um, yeah, I do think in general probably less chips means more skill. I guess. Like if we had no wild card, for example, you'd have to be really forward planning.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the chips are definitely better for engaged managers because then you can plan when to use them. The average player just uses them whenever, don't they? So they are more of an advantage for a
True,
skilled manager.
but
It's just that they
maybe between engaged managers,
between
maybe
engaged managers, yeah.
no chips, maybe would be more interesting.
I don't like the way
Possibly.
they are get out of jail cards. I do agree with that. Like, you get extra free hits thrown in and stuff, and you don't have to manage your team in advance. But again, yeah, it's I don't think it's
Yeah.
going to change. To be honest, I don't think that area will change. Maybe in the future, but we'll have
They
to
haven't.
see.
Did they, in the past, I remember there was all out attack, but I'm talking like 10 years ago.
That long ago?
Remember
Have
that?
we even had chips that long? I don't think we've had chips 10 years.
Well, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. There was a chip where you would have 4 strikers.
Yeah, that was right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one replaced that. Was it free hit? I
I
don't know.
don't
Maybe
know.
the chat will know.
Yeah. But to be honest, I would be very happy with no changes as well. Like, the beauty for me of FPL is the simplicity of it. You ultimately have like 2 or 3 decisions to make every week. Who do you captain? And do you make 1 or 2 transfers? And then who do you bench? Like, you have very few decisions to make, and I think that's what makes it so good and makes so many people engage in it because it's a lot of thought process for very few decisions. Whereas if you when people suggest bringing in things like, oh, you change your captaincy mid-game week, I think that's just never going to happen.
Yeah, but
and also would ruin the game. It would ruin the game, I think. Like, if you want to do that, play Sky or whatever. Like, the beauty of FPL isn't how simple it is.
Absolutely, but it also increases the luck factor a hell of a lot in FPL, and that's why we're seeing stuff like you had to have had literally 15 people in the top 10k didn't have positive luck like that. That's incredible. In Sky and stuff, like, they are very different games, but you are far more in charge of your destiny in that regard. You have so many more decisions to make in a week. You can literally transfer players in within a game week. You can change your captain. You have multiple captains. Like, you have so many more ways to affect the game, and that's why I think that game appeals to people who really like fantasy and having hands-on and decisions, because it feels like the amount of effort and time you put in correlates with how well you do, like a lot better. You can put a hell of a lot of work into FPL and just not do particularly well. Generally it will correlate, but not too well compared to the likes of Sky and Sun and other games where there is without a doubt correlation. I mean, I'm in a WhatsApp group, believe it or not, with like 10 people on Sky, and I've been in it for 15 years. And bear in mind, we formed this group before any of them have been winners. There's now 3 winners in my group. Right?
Mad.
Yeah, and all of us have finished in the top 100 multiple times, like over and over and over. So, like, if you know what you're doing in that game, yes, there's a lot less players, but the time and effort that you're putting in is clearly correlates with how well you do. Literally, Paul McCart, who's won it this season, just won 50k for the top prize plus all the mini leagues in. I don't know how much money he'll make, like probably 70k or plus he's made just on this one season alone.
He's won it before, has he?
No, he's not won it before, but he's been in the top sort of 20-25 all the time.
Yeah.
And there is a player who's won Sky twice. He's not in our WhatsApp group, but there is a guy who's won it twice.
Well.
Yeah. So it's, people in the UK who aren't playing this game are missing a trick. I've been telling people for years, but I don't want to sort of keep going on about it because I'll increase my competition by bringing them into it. So, the information.
Do people enter like money leagues with people they don't know?
Absolutely, yeah. Use Sky Bet. So I can literally go on Facebook and go Sky Fantasy Leagues, or go into a group chat, or even on Sky Fantasy Facebook page, they post stuff, and then you'll just have numpties in there going, join my league, and it's all handled through Sky Bet. So literally I put £10 money in a Sky Bet account, join their league. It might be I've been in like Dave's fishing league where there's like 6 people in it, and I've just stealthed in and I've beat them by like 700 points because they're absolutely woeful, and just cleaned up their cash. Like, that was part of the Sharks game at the very beginning, and it was very easy to do. Now people are kind of wised up to the fact that there's a lot of these people out there, and all the top players do this, but they will literally go into random people's league through Sky Bet and just clean them out. Like, the year I won 17 grand, I only won 5 grand in prize money when I came fourth. The rest of the money I cleaned up from mini leagues.
Yeah.
It's mad.
Wow. Yeah, that is another world, isn't it?
It is another world, absolutely. Anyway, we went on a massive tangent there. Should we ask them some
No, it's
questions?
interesting. I think I might play that next year, and I think I'm going to play.
Don't
you know what? I won't pay to play it because I'm not even allowed to because I work in football. But I also think they should bring out a WSL game as well. I think loads of people would play it.
Yeah, probably would, yeah.
Yeah, because there was one called She Plays, I think, something like that.
Okay.
But and that a lot of people I saw played last season. But I think if like the WSL bought out their own game, like I know loads of people that would play that if it was good. And for example, they could just replicate FPL's rules. It would make more people watch games, be more engaged in it. I think they're kind of missing a trick there. So hopefully that's something we see as well.
Well, that leads us on nicely to Sir Talp's first question, which is reasons to play or not play FPL. And I think that is probably one of the biggest reasons for me to actually play, is the fact that it increases my enjoyment. It's hard saying that sentence because it doesn't always increase the enjoyment, but in general of watching like football, like that I probably wouldn't have the time or wouldn't particularly have a massive interest in. Like I have interest in most games, but as you get older, things take over, right? And you can't really watch it, but I still will now put on games that I probably shouldn't do just because I've got FPL players playing in it. And I think that's a good reason to play it. I guess also to avoid, like, if you're, most of us playing this will probably have some sort of addictive personality where we spend way too much time on something we don't even have the control on and invest a lot into it. And I know if I wasn't playing FPL, how much I like football, I'd probably end up betting or doing something else, which is no doubt going to be worse off for me and my family overall. So it kind of, I get to cut all that off and just focus it on this area instead. So I think that's a good reason for me to play FPL. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that's definitely a reason I play it. So a good example of that this season is, so I mentioned before, my brother started playing FPL for the first time this season, and he's nowhere near as big a football fan as me, anyway. But he just enjoys football. Like, he'll watch big Premier League games, loves the Champions League, supports Preston like me. But in terms of like the big leagues, Premier League and Champions League, he just used to watch kind of the big games. Loves football, but just doesn't follow it really closely. And this season, he's just so engaged in it. And like he beat me. I think he finished very similar rank to you actually. But because he had a really good start to the season, he was then suddenly watching so many games. Like we have had really good banter about it all season. So for me, it's just like I hate that word, but like the banter element of it and being in group chats, and I just find that really fun. Like with mates being in mini leagues, just think it's a good laugh. And yeah, for me, it's like having met people through it as well now. As well, I know a lot of people who play don't have Twitter accounts and stuff like that, but for me, like I've met people through Twitter, started a podcast with you, etc. Like, there's that element of me that's now added. But yeah, but also watching games can be a curse as well. Like I hate, for example, that I'm watching this season. If I was to watch Man City play Leeds, like I love the idea of an underdog beating Man City, but if I've got double Man City defense, I can't enjoy Leeds scoring. So it also has a negative impact, and that's why I don't play like World Cup fantasy or Champions League fantasies, because I would just want to watch it without thinking about that, because I know I'd get really into it. So I like to have that as my little break where I can just watch football without FPL. But I would say if people like and again, another serious reason to play it is if you are someone who struggles with like, thankfully I've never struggled with it, but people who struggle with like gambling addiction, as you said before, I know people who, for them, FPL is like an amazing outlet and it's helped them recover from like a very serious addiction. So I think that's a really good reason for some people to play as well. Also, and again, another serious reason not to play it is if it really does impact your mood. Like it should impact your mood a little bit, otherwise why would you play it? Like it's going to make you feel gutted when your players concede and happy when they do score, for example. But if that's gone to an extreme level where it's impacting your day-to-day, like ruining your whole weekend, again, I think that's a reason not to play it.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Definitely, that was the one I was going to say as well. And it's even the people who, when we've got some of the smartest people in this game, like Sir Talp himself, who asked this question, and he knows how much variance in this game. It's very hard for people to accept how much variance is in a game with this many players in football. And like, you know, all the stats we've been to, even the top 10k, I keep banging up 15 people there have managed to get positive. Like, this guy knows the maths behind it, and he knows that you can't guarantee anything in this game. So to play a game where the amount of work and effort does not necessarily correlate to a very, very good finish, it will certainly correlate to almost certainly correlate to a good finish, but not a very good finish, then it's probably not the game to go through. And I can understand why a lot of them seem to want to cut that back and not do it as a result. Because there are other games where you put that much of effort in, you probably does correlate with being great. You know, something like, I don't know, chess or something. If you put the time and effort into that, you're likely to be much better. And I suppose poker again, although there is a lot of luck involved in poker. You know, you ultimately can improve your skill to a level where you're probably going to be up over the average person a lot more often. So yeah, there's other games basically to look at, I guess, than this as a result. Because yeah, even me, it still impacts my mood like 100%. 100% it does for a little while. I've just learned to cope with it better over the years and just sort of ignore it and just move on to the next one.
Yeah, I'm the same. For me now, like I give the like upsides massively outweigh the downsides for me. Like if I have an awful game week, like I'm gutted and it annoys me, but you know I get over that pretty quickly, to be honest. And got a lot of, I'm lucky to have a lot of other good things going in my life that take my mind off it.
Yeah.
So I can like again, being in like group chats and stuff, you learn to laugh it off with memes.
Absolutely, and that's what I do.
Memes are a good coping strategy.
Jack just says you must be a good poker player. Yeah, I do think I'm a pretty good poker player, actually. I am pretty good. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm certainly not the best. There are definitely better players than me out there.
I don't know. I don't think you played, actually.
Yeah, well, not so much anymore. That's the thing. The poker lifestyle, like from when I started playing poker, you actually had to go to casinos and play it, and then you end up staying up till 5 a.m. in the morning and then coming back. And you know, when you've like got kids and stuff, it's not really the one. I know you can do a lot of it online, but I think you lose something in that go. I prefer to have the tells as well. You know, part of my job, I guess, which I'll say on here, is actually reading people as well. So I think that actually benefits me. So anyway, what's the next question?
Luke is a palm reader in his spare time. Psychic.
I read arse cheeks. Just tell your future. That's off Carl Pilkington pod, isn't it? At some point, I swear it is.
Yeah, it is. Well, XFM or something.
Yeah. No, actually, it's on. It's on Idiot Abroad. Pretty sure it's Idiot Abroad.
Is it?
Yeah. Where he reads his arse cheeks and then go on then, and he's gonna have cancer and die, and he has to go. Is it the China one where he had to go put like a letter underneath the mountain, otherwise he'll have bad? I think it might be that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Can't remember. What data do we find least helpful? Says Western Wasters. And when would we use the eye test?
Data I find least helpful which I think I've ranted about before on here before, is like big chances, because it's often just really arbitrary and just like decided by Opta, for example. Sometimes there's not even like an XG threshold for it, and it's just completely pointless when you can just look at XG. It's just like if you can, it's like looking at shots or like shots on target, and then you've got big chances, then you've got XG. Well, why not just look at XG and have a better measure of how big that chance was? So that one really annoys me. Um, what do I find least helpful apart from that? That's the big one that
What
stands
about
out to me.
chances conceded from this side and all that stuff? That does my head
Oh
in.
yeah, I don't like that either. The thing that I don't like that, yeah, if it's like chances conceded down the right, for example, the reason I don't like that is because the chance could be conceded down the right, and that might result in a shot, but it also might result in a cross, and therefore you want the player on the left wing or the central player. So
I couldn't tell you where you want them still to this point. I understand
yeah,
players having a weakness, like maybe the right back's just not very good and he can get beat a
yeah,
lot. Or let's
oh, definitely,
look at Leeds. I mean, their defence is terrible overall, but I think Firpo sort of took some
yeah,
sort of trophy as probably the worst player in the league this season. He was absolutely shambolic every time I watched him. But did that result in right wingers getting more points than left wingers for FPLO against Leeds? Maybe, but I'd imagine even if that was the case, it would be negligible. And that's probably the extremes. It just changes from game to game. The chances are created in different ways, different That's another thing as well. The tactics used by today's managers, to a large extent, it is very much tweaked to the particular match. The better the manager, the more chance that is the case as well. It's not just one plan fits all. So I just think it's captured by XG data anyway. I'm not saying it's not helpful, but I just don't find that helpful.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that as well. When would you use the eye test?
I use it all the time, to be fair. Anytime I watch a game, it's always impacting my thoughts and whether I ever end up acting on it. But I certainly watch a game and think, oh, okay, Rashford doesn't look particularly right. I know it can change in an instance, but it might be like, okay, Rashford's just come back from injury, combined,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And he looks like he's ambling around the pitch. Like, I don't try and let it affect me to the point where, or for example, I captained Rashford this week, despite he'd only just come back, and he looked terrible in the last game. I thought he was really bad. I know he ended up didn't getting points, but he still ended up with like 0.8 XG this week and could have easily scored. So that balance again is tricky, but I certainly do use it all the time. It's just whether it overrides anything or not.
yeah, same. I just think, yeah, and I also think there are things like a player can constantly be in really advanced positions, for example, and not be passed to, or yeah, you can pick up on stuff like that. But to be honest, in general, I wouldn't say the eye test. Watching football really doesn't impact my decisions that much, to be honest. And I sometimes think actually, if I didn't watch any football, I wonder if I'd be better at the game.
Quite possibly. I do think it's useful in terms of when players. I know I just said it, but coming back from injury, I think that gives you an idea of where they are in their fitness, because we're not given that information by managers. We're sort of sold, oh, I think he's kind of ready to start a game, and then we don't know whether they're just bigging him up and they're trying to hope that he is and trying to put minutes in his legs. So I think there is a noticeable impact with some players. He's like Luis Diaz came back from a long-term injury, right? Who knows how he was going to play? But I think anyone who watched the games will say that Luis Diaz looked pretty damn good from the moment he came on and was performing well. But then you'll have other instances where a player will come back and they don't look right for whatever reason, and it might take them a long time. I mean, I think Martial's a good one this year. He's actually been a player who was, historically at least, when he was fit and available, looks like he can produce the goods, and he has produced the goods. But anyone who watched Man United and watched Martial, he looked like a competition winner sometimes in some of the games. I don't know what's happened to him, but he kind of put me off. And again, did it matter? Because didn't he score this week in 38? Anyway, despite all that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So again, how much it impacts your decisions or how much it should impact your decisions is questionable. But I can't say that it doesn't.
Like new signings as well. Probably another one where we just don't have data on them in terms of how settled they are into the team. Like a lot of Liverpool fans, because I live in Liverpool, a lot of mates who support Liverpool. I've chatted to them about Nunes, and again, they think he's brilliant, but they're just like, he's just not quite got Klopp's system yet. And so a lot of them were saying to me, just based on watching him, like I just don't see him. I was more confident in his minutes towards the end of the season than they were, based on just watching him and just seeing that Klopp clearly wasn't happy in terms of him just not doing what he wants Klopp to do, what Klopp wants him to do. Sorry,
that is definitely another factor, actually, what the manager wants from that player rather than what we see, and we've seen that with Pep a lot as well, right? A player like, oh, why's Mahrez been benched? He just scored 2 goals. Well, if he wasn't tracking back his fullback and Pep wanted him to do that, then he's not going to play the next game. It's it could come down to stuff like that. So
yeah. Yep.
Should we move on?
Yeah, we got another question.
Ryan
From
Cameron's
Ryan,
one's interesting.
yeah.
Interesting, yeah. Go on.
Have wide forwards been affected by inverted fullbacks? It feels like they're having to stay wide a lot more. Do the stats back this up at all? I feel like more sides will use this tactical innovation next season. I think that last bit's probably right. I think it's like a trend, definitely a trend in the modern game, and it's being used really successfully by big teams. So it probably will continue to happen. In terms of how much that's affecting wingers, to be honest, I think I'd need more time to think about it and to kind of like delve into stats. And even then, I don't know how you kind of see that in stats, apart from just looking at those players that might have impacted. So I don't want to just like try and make up an answer, to be honest, and look stupid. But I know you've put some thought into it though, Luke.
No, I mean, I think what you said there is right. I do agree that it seems to be a trend. I mean, obviously, saw Man City pretty much bin off Cancelo, go to this back three with an inverted fullback in midfield. We saw Arsenal pretty much doing it from the beginning of the season with Zinchenko. They're the two most successful clubs this time. And then Liverpool pretty much changed their fortunes around when they moved Trent into midfield. It kind of coincided with them starting to play well, and they copied it as well. So probably certainly three of the top four teams in the league potentially. I know Liverpool didn't quite finish there, but you'd say historically they have now moved to this system. And these things are trends, right? It's happened before in the past with teams. Lahm for Bayern Munich and stuff under Pep as well, and they all go in cycles and change. So how long it will stay for, I don't know. Whether it will change back again, it comes down to the individual teams and players. I get what he's saying about how, because the fullbacks are now inside the pitch, the wingers have to stay wide to create the width, and therefore they're not goal threats anymore. Yes, maybe in some occasions, but you just always have to judge it on the individual teams and players, I think, because Zinchenko does that for Arsenal, yet Saka and Martinelli were fantastic options. And I know Martinelli, you can say his positioning slightly different depending on who the centre forward is as well. Maybe he's slightly more further forward and holds width. But again, these things change from game to game and the personnel they've got. And to pre-know what they're going to do with those players and each game and then chop and change and react to that just seems too hard when it's like, well, Martinelli's just a good player, full stop. If the price is right, people are going to have him. So it always overrides that for me. When he's looking at Mahrez and Grealish, I mean, they probably are staying quite a lot wide as a result and therefore aren't options. But, Grealish was never really an option, I would say, for most of the season, apart from the fact he was cheap enough and playing a lot of games. He wasn't really ever there in the data. He's certainly not a Salah, is he? So it's a really wishy-washy answer, but I just think, yes, it potentially has got an impact, but we have to judge every case on an individual basis, and ultimately they could change their tactics game to game anyway.
Yeah, sure. Should we move on to the last two questions? We'll just do that one that's last on the list here from FPL Gatto. Cheeky question: how did you get so good at podcasting in just one season? Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Not sure we are that good, but we try.
Great lying skills. Love that.
They did ask that, I promise. I didn't send that one to myself. How are you both so good looking? Then he says, half serious question. I got very lucky to have a very good, very, very lucky to have a very good rank. I used FPL review consistently, other algorithms, my good old eye test. How much credit should I take? I think take all the credit. Like, obviously the reality is that if you've done really, really well, you've probably got lucky, but the reality is, based on what he said there in terms of how he's making decisions, I'm sure he's made loads of good decisions as well. That's all you can do is focus on making good decisions. So I would take plenty of credit, enjoy it ultimately. Absolutely. It's more fun to if you're doing badly, it's funner to talk about variance. But if you've done really, really well, you've done all you can. You can't control it. You've also probably been a bit lucky. So I would enjoy it, mate.
No control over the luck whatsoever. You're the one who decided how much review to use, how much eye test, how much of another algorithm. You are the person behind all of those decisions. No one had the same team if they use review all year. Well, virtually no one. So you take all the credit. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then last question, probably nice one to summarise and end the season, from Adrian Comer. Highs and lows of the season, and I think we could talk for ages here, particularly about the lows.
But
maybe we just name a few each.
It's like my MO.
What are the few that stick out for you, mate?
There's so many to mention. I think going. I already said going Digne over Shaw, when Digne had 3 home games in 4 and probably the easiest games of the season, and I think he conceded in the first, then got injured in the second, and then replaced by Moreno. They signed him in that sinister was was bad, but combine that with the fact that Shaw scored like his first goal for Man United in about 8 years, got 15 points in the first game, got like 3 clean sheets or something. I don't know what it was. I'm probably making it up now, exaggerating it, but it was bad.
Yeah,
Like
it was bad, yeah.
that decision was bad. But was it bad? I guess it was bad, but it was certainly a bad outcome. And then the wild card, where I don't think I can beat myself up too much on that, but the wild card literally cost me 50 points. Like, it was a joke wild card. Like, Salah was his highest score of the season, like 21 points or whatever it was. I removed the best part about it was I removed Brennan Johnson, who scored a brace versus Everton. Like, I ended up getting 43 points, I think it was, and my actual team would have been close to 100.
Yeah.
So literally, if I wait one more week and then wildcard with an extra week's information, I'm 50 points better off, and I'm like top 10k easily. Like, just off that one base, one basis to wildcard. But those are probably my 2 biggest lows.
What's your biggest high?
Oh, I don't remember the highs. I must be just like a negative person overall.
Kiwior scoring is pretty good. Kiwior scoring in the last game.
I mean, that was good. Yeah, that was definitely good. But I never really got to appreciate the high because I just wasn't around for the whole day, if you know what I mean. And even when I looked at my team at the end of the... I focused on, I didn't captain K. My captain blanked. I took a hit for no reason for Eze. Like, I ended up focusing on the negative. But that was
like 15 points or whatever, 13 points, whatever it was on everyone, because hardly anyone had an Arsenal defender either.
No, yeah, you're right. I can't think of too many other highs, to be honest with you. Captaining Haaland sounds really, really boring, but I adopted that really quickly. I know a lot of people watching this will, but I quickly moved. Like, me and you were really confident right at the beginning of this pod when we started to do this season that Haaland would probably break all records, and it wasn't going to be a problem, and he was going to be the best player. But I think the data at the beginning had Salah a lot of the time higher in review for obvious reasons, because it hasn't a weighting on historical data as well. And I quickly thought, no, do you know what? I'm going to go with Haaland, because I just think this guy is like unbelievable. And I think there was also luck, right? Because we can also point at the distribution of goals over the season and showed those hat tricks at the beginning were obviously just not sustainable. So there was luck as well involved here.
And also Salah had a decent season in the end, but a lot of his goals came in the second half of the season.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think the early adoption of doing that and saying, no, I'm going to go with Haaland was probably a better part of my decision making, because a lot of the analytical crowd that have ended up beating me and doing so well and being in the top, they actually had Salah captain for all these games. So how they've managed to make up these points, I do not know. They're just obviously far better managers than me. But if I hadn't have done that Haaland thing, I'd be so far behind.
I think mine jump out more easily, but again, that's because of what I mentioned before. I think my seasons has been just way more like extreme ups and extreme downs, to be honest. So they're really obvious straight away. I didn't have Trippier for there was 8 games where he got 77 points across the 8 games. I didn't have him, and his EO was like close to 100% every game. It was absolutely grim. And I think it was a bit unlucky because, again, that clearly wasn't sustainable. And then I had triple Newcastle defence, and they got like 1 clean sheet and 10 or something after that. That's like the obvious painful thing, that and having Darwin and Edison. But I had a couple of really big highs because of that comeback I had. Basically, I'm just quickly looking at my history now. So one will be when I bench. So I wildcarded 27 a bit later than everyone else, and it was just an absolute dream, to be honest. But in 29, when I benched boost, I got 154 points, and it was I had Solanke who scored. I had triple Newcastle defence who got a clean sheet against United, and just loads of other things went my way. And that was I went from like 300k to about 100k in a game week, and suddenly it really felt like top 100k was even not doable, and suddenly I was nearly there just from 1 game week. I'd double Chelsea defence, McAllister captain, he got 9 points, Watkins for 17. Like it was just brilliant. My bench boost actually got me 20, 30, 20, 29. It was a 37 point bench boost. And there was one point where I thought I was going to get like a 60 point bench boost if Newcastle got that second clean sheet.
Yeah, that would have been mental.
So yeah, that was great. Like 37 is mad for a bench boost. So that's one. And then in general, then from that period, those next few game weeks, having Solanke, but particularly against Spurs, I didn't expect anything. And he got 15 points. He got 2 assists and a goal, I think. One was like 93rd minute. And then my last one that sticks out to me was a few game weeks ago. I had McAllister and I had no Man United defenders in that double game week. So I was on for I had the
opposite. No McAllister and I had Man United defenders. Yeah, that killed me.
I was on for quite a big red arrow, and then literally last kick of the game is a corner, results in a handball and a penalty, and so that swing for me was absolutely huge.
Hmm.
I think did I have McAllister captain? I can't remember.
You did have
Whether
McAllister captain. I'm pretty sure you did. I didn't have McAllister.
yeah,
You had him captain. I had Luke Shaw, who was on max bonus and a clean sheet, and then he got a yellow card as well, didn't he? And then conceded, so he ended up on like 1 point from like 9.
yeah, that was just
It's like a
no,
20-point swing or something like, if not more, like in one
yeah.
action.
It was more than 20 points from that one kick because I
Yeah.
remember feeling sick when he was taking the penalty because I knew if he puts this wide, like if he misses the penalty, I've gone from like a 20-point positive swing to an even bigger negative swing. So yeah, that was an unbelievable highlight because it was literally the last kick of the game week for me.
Yeah. I want to add some positives actually as well, very quickly. If you just reminded me, it's getting Solanke in the first time when he was like, people in the community were saying, "Oh, he's not a good pick because he's barely done anything." I think it was like, in fact, I'll just go back. Game week 8, maybe. Game week 9. I just think there's always something special about buying a player who hasn't been getting points for a run, and then they get points, like relative to their value as well. Like, he didn't go wild Solanke by any means, but he did his job. For me, that is the actual skill part of FPL. Is not just saying, well, this player's been getting points, they're really good, it's obvious, and I need to get him quick, so I'll get him in, and that's what everyone does. It's the ability to say, no, even though this player hasn't been getting points, I think that there is a chance he may start getting points, and I'm going to get him before everyone else, and he's going to serve it out, and then he does go on to getting it. They're my favourite parts of FPL, honestly. So yeah, Slanky doing that was great. To flip it on his head again for one more negative for me, I did the same with Rodrigo. Got him in 4. He had like a double game week, 4 home fixtures on penalties, playing up front for Leeds in midfield. Got him in before everyone else. You know the story I keep mentioning. Injured before he even kicks a ball because he comes on for 10 minutes in a cup game. Yeah, that hurts because he's also had an EO of like 2% or something. But anyway.
Was that just a mistake in terms of you could have just bought him later, or did you have the
No, because I bought him the game week beforehand because I needed to do it a week before to have him in place to afford that player that week for whatever reason. I had 2 free transfers. So I literally had no option. Like, if I wanted the other player, I can't remember the circumstances, but I had him a week before that. It's not like I bought him too early in the week and I could have waited. That wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Jack's got a quick question in there. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Jack says, did you carry on that alt account where you copied review exactly? So we had an account where we did exactly that. We just copied reviews moves, but Luke kept forgetting to do it, so we gave up on it in the end.
There's a half truth there somewhere.
Yeah, I did. I kept forgetting to log in and do it, and I forgot like 2 game weeks in a row. And then there was like, trying to get the last minute Man City leagues, etc. Yeah. It became too chaotic. So that's my fault. I will own up to that.
I think the weeks you forgot, it actually did really well as well, did it? There was one week in particular where we left it and it got like ridiculous points. But yeah, we just...
There was one random week where it wanted to captain Salah, I think. And everyone by then was captaining Haaland and he was like 0.1 ahead on review or something. Yeah, and Salah hauled. It was like Salah's first haul of the season or something, but I forgot to do it. Never mind.
Never mind, indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess this point would we don't know what we're going to be doing next season. Like, we hope to still be podcasting in some form. We don't know if it'll be as regular, whether we'll do it more on Spaces because it's a bit less time consuming. Where we continue it on here with like more guests or like less frequently to save a bit of time. We're not sure yet, but we've got a few months to think that through. So we'll be back in some form next season, definitely. And we just like massively appreciate everyone listening. I think we've got 1.36 subscribers, over 1,000 followers on Twitter. About 1,000 people listening every week if you combine YouTube and podcast listens. So yeah, I just think we just massively appreciate everyone listening. It's been really good fun.
Yeah, absolutely echo that. Thanks a lot, guys. It makes it worth it. Thanks for just tuning in, sharing everything. It's been great. And sorry for the lack of pods towards the end, but it was kind of happenstance. We only ever wanted to do it where it was fun and enjoyable for me and Sam, and not felt forced. So and some of the weeks, I suppose that's part and parcel of being the analytical, or trying to be an analytical pod anyway, is that, you know, how much thought and opinion you put behind it is quite hard some weeks, because some weeks there's just a very obvious move, and you know there's no point me and Sam just coming over and going, yeah, we should just copy review here and, you know, get Haaland in and captain him or whatever. So we try to avoid making content for content's sake. So I hope you can understand. Thanks a lot, guys, and we will be back next season, like Sam says, in some vein.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Enjoy your break.
Enjoy your break.